Joining us now is Clive Gray. He is wears a few different hats around here in Greensboro. I'm told, Clive, that you are the chair of the Land Trust, the clerk of the Conservation Commission, and have quite a background as a development economist at Harvard University. Widely traveled in the third world as part of that work you did before you retired full-time up here to the Northeast Kingdom of Vermont in 2002. Welcome to the program. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you very much, Dave. Great pleasure.
Yeah, and Clive, tell me a little bit about, this is really interesting to me. You have this perspective as a development economist, and you were mentioning on the break that you had done a lot of your work in the third world, but one of the themes of really the biggest theme of this series we're doing this summer is how are small towns in Vermont coping with economic changes and keeping the communities vibrant and that sort of thing. I'm sure it's quite a bit different than you might have run into in Latin America or Africa or any other places you were traveling during your working career. But tell me a little bit about what you see here in terms of the vibrancy, the hopes for the future, and that sort of thing here in Greensboro.
Well, of course, Greensboro is considered a resort community, among other hats that it wears. We have Caspian Lake, which has been the major attraction of the summer community since the 19th century.
Yep.
And so the Greensboro Land Trust has now conserved over 1,100 acres. The Vermont Land Trust has conserved probably about 3,000 acres in town. The Nature Conservancy has conserved about 1,000 acres. And so we are trying to keep the rural character of the community. On the other hand, we also recognize that there is a need for commercial activity. There's a need for residences. One of the big problems which came out, in fact, at our annual meeting Monday of this week, we had a panel of people, and one of the entrepreneurs who are working on conserved land in Greensboro. And one of the big issues is that taking land out of commercial or residential use means that the value of land for residences is increasing, and it's making it hard for employees of the various enterprises in town to buy land in Greensboro and to live in Greensboro. So in fact, one of the figures that has been calculated is that about 90% of the people who earn their living in Greensboro, in fact, don't live in the town. They live in neighboring towns, and so obviously have to commute to work. So that's one of the issues we're worried about.
And that, of course, increases traffic, and obviously commuting is I don't know that people think about this much, but it's a huge time sink. You know, if you spend a half an hour in the morning and a half an hour in the evening in your car, that's an hour out of your day that you could have been, reading a book or just relaxing, or maybe learning how to play a musical instrument. Who knows? But
or visiting with your children,
visiting with your family,
spouse.
Absolutely, yeah. And any number of other activities in life that are probably more rewarding than sitting behind the wheel of a car. So, not to mention the climate impact and all that. When people add up the hydrocarbons that flow out the exhaust pipe for these vehicles, and around here, I'm sure most trips are individual trips because carpools are hard to work out in a rural area. And
exactly.
I don't know. And so how do you crack that nut? I mean, what would you suggest for Greensboro if you wanted to have if you wanted to promote the idea that we should make make it easier to live here in town and shorten your commute and be part of the community, not only during the day when you're working here, but also in the evenings and weekends when you're at home?
Well, one of the suggestions that has been made is that we should try to develop some of what's called cluster housing, where people would have their residences fairly close to one another. Each residence could have a total of 10 acres, let's say, so the rural character of the town would not be infringed, but the houses would be fairly close to one another, and then the 10 acres of rural land would just sort of radiate out from the cluster of houses. So it would require an entrepreneur to make an investment in that kind of a project,
Yep.
but it's something that is being looked at, particularly by the Planning Commission.
So if you wanted to put 5 housing units on one parcel, let's say, is what is envisioned a 50-acre parcel because you need
That's
10
right.
acres per, or could you put five housing units at the center of or somewhere on 10 acres and then preserve the other 9 acres, let's say?
Yeah, I think as of now, that would be the mode that would be required by the zoning ordinance.
So you'd need a 50-acre parcel to
Yeah.
put 5 housing units.
Yeah.
Even that, it sounds to me like you'd be running into the similar problems of just a shortage of possible building sites and then driving up the cost, obviously. And I don't know. It sounds like people are thinking about this stuff, though. So that's
Exactly.
first step in making progress, right?
Exactly.
And any other challenges that you see as a person with a planning background here in Greensboro? Housing obviously sounds like maybe the biggest one, but what about transportation or access to services? Obviously, it's a very rural area up here. Access to the internet, cellular phones, etc. What do people talk about here in terms of what we'd like to see added to our community in the coming years?
Well, we're very happy with the access that we have to the internet and to cell phone service. It's not at a high level of professional activity, of course, and I have a nephew who is actually working to computerize a lot of the data in the Historical Society, of which I am the treasurer, and he has to go to the Hardwick Library to have the kind of internet access that is needed to get some of this data stored. So we would love to see a somewhat higher grade internet access here.
Higher speed internet, yeah.
Higher speed, exactly.
Yeah, that's interesting. I want to thank you very much, Clive Gray, for joining us this
Great
morning.
pleasure.
It's a pleasure to have you on talking about what goes on in Greensboro.